Hello and welcome to Fit After 40. I'm Chris here with Tony. Our guest today is Kate Boyle. Kate, welcome to the show. How are you?
Good, thanks. Thanks so much for having me on the show today.
Oh, thanks for joining us. Thanks for joining us. Um, so why don't we start with your story? You were a professional dancer. Tell me about that. What type of dance did you do? What was that experience like?
So I grew up dancing, and unfortunately, when I was 16, I tore the meniscus in my knee.
Oh,
So,
Oh,
and up until that point, I had been sort of focusing on classical ballet, but
sure.
also jazz and sort of commercial dance. I had a scholarship to do full time, and I kind of had to make a choice at that point whether or not I was going to kind of continue on or look for a different sort of alternative career path, which was really hard at that stage because at that point I hadn't thought about anything else. And with being in the dance world and nutrition kind of being a huge part of that, and growing up in sort of the 90s where, diet and lifestyle was very different to what we have in today's world. There was a lot of restriction eating, eating disorders, that sort of thing kind of going around in that industry, which I was, definitely suffering from. And so I decided in the end, after talking to lots of people, that I would change my career path and look into studying nutrition rather than sticking with dance and potentially, as people said to me, you'll always be in the back row, you'll never be up the front, you're too much of a liability. So I always kept dance as part of my career. I taught
Hmm.
dance, really kind of evolved. But yeah, that's how it kind of swapped across from
Yeah.
dance to nutrition.
It is a challenging career, professional dance. Tony's daughter can actually attest to that. She's
yeah.
uh, working her way through that world as we speak. What was that like? Tell me the physical demands, the training. What was that experience like in the dance world? Demanding.
It's yeah, it's pretty full on. I would say nowadays, the dancers are a lot more supported. We've got things like, Pilates and, a lot more sort of
Yeah.
focus on rehab, but also, preparing and cross training. Back in the day, it was just dance, dance, dance 24/7, and if something went wrong, you'd go off and sort of see someone to get fixed. But there wasn't a whole lot of focus on doing cross training of, different muscles and really working in that strength training component, which I think you often see in a lot of the male sports, sort of things like football and
Mhm.
that from an early age. They're kind of encouraged to lift weights, but dancers just weren't. It just wasn't part of it. You just conditioned and just did more dance.
You'd be surprised that they still, to some degree, are not. Like my daughter tore her meniscus actually in gymnastics when she was doing gymnastics, and then she switched to ballet. And in gymnastics, there was like a heavy emphasis on that cross training. And then once she got to ballet, they hardly still like they dance 8 hours a day, 6 days a week. Hardly any focus on that, which of course, in the same thing, she's had injuries, and the next thing you know, she's off with that injury, and we've got
Mm.
to try to get somebody to fix it, and there's not a lot of thought put into actually the cross training still.
And cross training
Yeah.
can be such an important factor when it comes to
Yeah,
injury prevention
Well, that's it for every sport too. It's not
for every
just
yeah,
for
sport.
dance, it's all sports.
For every sport.
absolutely.
Um, Now, you alluded to this earlier, but I'd like to kind of explore a little further. Obviously, as a nutritionist who worked in the dance world, there are a lot of problematic relationships with food in that world. So can you speak to that a little bit, particularly with your background in nutrition?
Yeah, I think nowadays things have changed a lot. We're a lot more welcoming of different body sizes,
Mm.
and we have a lot more knowledge around nutritional needs when it comes to protein, carbohydrates, fats, and especially in relation to doing exercise. I think back when I was growing up in the 90s, it was very much low carb, sorry, high carb, get rid of the fat.
Hmm.
So fat was, feared. And so we had, a lot of people that were eating a lot of sugar and cutting out all the fat and
Oh,
really not
wow.
focusing on protein and fat, which is now kind of the reverse of what's happened. So I think the knowledge has changed a lot. There still is obviously that stigma in the dance world of eating disorders because, I still work with dancers in the Pilates studio where, the mum comes in and we're working on Pilates, but she kind of says to me on the side, actually, there are some things going on with her eating as well. Can we explore that too? And, part of it is you're in a leotard 5, 6 days a week.
Mm.
Everyone's judging you on your body and how you look. And part of dance is always about aesthetics. It's how the move looks, how the body looks. So there is a big focus on that body image, but I do really think that it is changing. I have a few dancers that I teach now that, they're not that sort of stick thin wafer type. They're
Right.
still winning their competitions, they're still getting scholarships. So it is changing. It's just always going to be a slow change, I think, in that
Mm.
world.
Never changes as fast as we want it to. And
Yeah.
that's true for a lot of things. I think the change never happens as fast as a lot of us would prefer. So let's talk about your inspiration to start a Pilates studio. Uh, Mind Movement Health. That is your company, right?
Yes. So a little bit like what Tony was saying, when I kind of, finished dancing at around 18, I'd torn the ligaments in my ankle, I'd torn the meniscus in my knee, I'd torn my hamstring, I had SIJ pain, lower back pain, like just lots of
Ooh,
pain. And, nothing, I'd seen physios, but nothing was really fixing it until a girlfriend of mine said, "Oh, why don't you, do Pilates?" And she'd done the Pilates course and she said it was fantastic. And I said, "Okay, right, we'll go off and do it." And I pretty much rehabbed my own body. My pain disappeared, my lower back pain disappeared, my core got stronger. You would assume that a dancer would have a really strong core,
you'd
but
think.
you'd think, but you don't get educated about what muscles you should be activating. You kind of just get told, draw up, pull up, grow taller, all of these cues, but there's nothing about the anatomy of it and what should be working. A lot of dancers also suffer from, leakage, a little bit of incontinence from the constant jumping because they're
Mm.
not talked to about their pelvic floor and things either, which is kind of things that you think would be basic, but again, doesn't come through. So I rehabbed my own body through Pilates and I thought, geez, there's really something in this. And so I went off and did the course. And then I started teaching other people that were coming in with knee pain, a hip replacement, lower back or
Ah.
herniated discs. And I'm like, oh, wow, like this really works, not just from an athlete point of view, but from post-surgery, just from the average person with, general pain. And so I kind of then started specializing with working with people with pain or with injuries and really focusing on their biomechanics to get them back to movement. And whether or not that was sport or just, the weekend warrior just wanting to do their thing.
Wow, lots to unpack there. Starting at the beginning, a lot of people may not be familiar with Pilates, and so could you just start by telling me a little bit about it? What is it? What movements does it entail? What muscles does it train? That type of thing.
Sure. So if you're not familiar with Pilates, it's a full body movement system. So a little bit differently to say how, if you go to the gym, a lot of people will do isolating exercises. We'll look at the full body and work with, your cross slings and your biomechanics of your movement. The principles of Pilates too are your breath. So that's another thing a lot of sports don't kind of hone in on is really focusing on your breath, flowing movement, centering, concentration, control, and precision. So, just from those principles alone, we're trying to really focus in on our movement, but we're focusing in on our alignment. We're developing our proprioception, so our mind body awareness when we move. So, we're really moving with that thoughtful connection to our body. And the movements, can be standing balance movements. We can use big pieces of equipment like the reformer and the Cadillac that use a spring system. So rather than using weights as such, they use springs. And
Okay.
the springs are different loads as well. So similar to
Okay.
weights. And then also you've got mat Pilates where you can just pop down on the floor and do, body weight exercises as well. So essentially a full movement system that you can build strength and mobility in at the same time.
What's the reasoning behind using, you said the spring system as opposed to weights?
Yeah.
What's the reasoning there?
Well, originally Joseph Pilates, when he was building his equipment, he was kind of working with what he had at the time.
Mm,
And, back in, this is sort of pre-World War II sort of starting,
wow.
he was a boxer, a yoga, a dancer. He kind of drew his inspiration from lots of different sports to create this system. So he was using what he had at the time, and then with his inspiration from all those different areas, that's how he built his own, chair and reformer at home using what he had.
I didn't know it was that old. So this was pre-World War One, did you say?
Pre-World War II.
World
So
War Two.
he immigrated he's German originally and then
Okay.
immigrated to America post-World War II and opened his first Pilates studio in New York in the 40s.
Oh, wow. So you mentioned a few things that sound a little bit like yoga to me. The mat Pilates, the focus on breathing and awareness of your body. Uh, can you contrast it with yoga? What is it that makes it different? Does it incorporate some yoga?
It's very similar to yoga in some ways. It's kind of like one of those things in the Pilates world. Some people, don't like being compared to yoga and that, but there are similar things with that kind of mind-body connection, almost getting into that flow state. We do work on mobility, but we have, a big emphasis on strength at the same time. So again, if we're using the equipment and we're using the springs and things, that's where we can really load up and we can change the dynamics of the exercise. So depending on who I'm working with, if I've got an athlete that's a runner, we're going to do more plyometric work. We're going to use, different spring settings to somebody that
Hmm.
maybe has had a hip replacement. So I think, in yoga, you have that mind body connection, but you don't have as much of that individualization to the client. And you probably don't have the scope in sort of work in the sense that you can use equipment and then you can use your body weight as well.
So what does a typical class kind of go like? Because I'm you've got this equipment that's looks interesting. Like I've never actually experienced the equipment. I've seen it and so on. So like how do you work with a client, I guess, on an individual basis and in the context of these pieces of equipment?
Well, I think it's, really probably good to point out that there's different forms of Pilates. Reformer
Yeah.
Pilates has really taken off, where a lot of people will go to a class and there might be 10 to 15 reformers and everybody's doing the same thing. The
Okay.
type of Pilates I teach is we individualize it. So I will only ever have a maximum of 4 people in a class, and each
Okay.
person is doing different exercises depending on their strength, weaknesses, goals, injuries, etc. So a little bit different in their teaching, which is, if listeners are listening in and thinking about trying Pilates, have a think about what type, and what you need. But when I'm working with a client, when they first come in, I'll do a postural assessment. I'll look at their gait, how they walk. We'll go through their injury history. I'll look at how they're even breathing, if they're overworking accessory muscles up into the scalenes and the upper traps. I'll, do like a core assessment, check out what their pelvic floor is, how active that is. And then we kind of build their program for there. So some clients may need more mobility work before they move into the strength work because their range of motion may be restricted. If I've got somebody that's had an injury, obviously we're going to focus on that area, but looking at their sort of postural assessment and their gait, even though they may have a knee injury, some of it may be coming from their foot or their foot alignment. So it's kind of that sort of whole assessment that comes together, and then we build that program and we scale that program as we go along.
Okay,
So
that's
you just
awesome.
packed a lot into
Yeah.
that last that last paragraph that I want to dig a little deeper into. Um, so let's start with with your client population. You've mentioned a broad variety of people, dancers, runners, people recovering. So and you do very small classes, so very personalized. What does your client population look like?
I kind of have a mix. At the minute, with sort of where I am located, I'd say the majority of my clients are over the age of 40. So I get a
Okay,
lot of sort of 50 to
it's a
70
good
year
fit.
olds that are coming in, yeah, that are
Yeah.
really trying to just build strength back up. Sometimes I'm getting clients that have had, they've come back with a scan that may say they're
Mm,
osteopenia or osteoporosis. So we've got to
mhm,
start working on bone strength. A few of my clients have had sort of hip replacements. And then
mhm.
at the other end, I've got a couple of prenatal clients, that are pregnant at the minute. I've got a couple of dancers, a couple of younger footballers. So my day never looks the same, and each client I work with never looks the same because they've all got those different goals. But the
Wow.
majority of my clients, I would say, are 40 plus, and they're really coming to Pilates because they're either trying to just keep themselves conditioned or they've
Mhm.
had some type of pain or injury, and their chiro or their physio or their myotherapist has referred them to me to come and try Pilates.
Okay. You mentioned your assessment when you take on a new client. You mentioned range of motion. Um, can you walk us through an assessment? Let's say that I've come to you. I'm a runner and a cyclist. Um, maybe I've had some leg pain. Where do we start?
Well, I pretty much watch you as soon as you start to come up and walk in the door, because a lot of the time I'll get my information just seeing how you move without feeling like I'm watching you in the first place. So even as you're kind of walking in the door, I'm watching you to see how you move, how you're standing, are you shifting your weight to one side more than the other, when they sit down, they feel in like a comprehensive form. So, we want to know what previous surgeries you've had, what injuries you've had over the years, because again, all of these will add up and change the way that you move or
Hmm.
sometimes compound to create injuries further on. Once you've kind of finished that form, we go through it in detail, and then I'll get them to, have a stand, and I'll look at them posturally. So I'll look from the feet, I'll look to see if they're pronating or supinating,
Hmm.
are the femurs, rotating in? Do they have bow legs? Again, we'll do some sort of forward flexion and check out what the spinal movement's doing if there's a scoliosis that's happening there. Lateral side bending, some extension, rotation to see how that spine moves. If you're a runner or a cyclist, I'm going to obviously check out what your hip flexion, your knee
Hmm.
flexion, and your ankle flexion, and that's like. So I'll look at you, doing a squat, doing a lunge. I'll always look at people's gait. So I'll have them walk for me too to see what the movement's happening through there. And then if they're a runner as well, we might pop outside and I'll get them to have a run too. But the other thing to mention as well is when you're doing Pilates, you don't wear shoes. So it's interesting to see how people move when they're walking in shoes, and then when they take their shoes off and then we start moving, it can be different as well. So that's another thing about Pilates, that when we're working with, say, a runner, and maybe they've had some type of injury, we'll often work on a lot of foot mobility and foot strength work because we're not working in shoes. So that's kind of another thing that's great about Pilates as well.
What's the reasoning for doing these exercises barefoot?
Well, one, you're going to get better connection with the ground. So you're going
Hmm.
to feel and switch on the receptors in your feet. Two, our foot muscles are our stability muscles. So if we don't have strong feet, we don't have strong foundations. So how can we think that, our calves, our knees, our hips, our lower back are going to be doing what they're doing if we're not working on the feet? So seeing how the feet move and really strengthening the feet is key if you want to be great at anything that you do, really. And it's kind of the thing that people don't think about because we
Yeah.
wear shoes all the time.
So let's talk a little bit about the benefits. What kind of benefits do your athletes see? Particularly people who are using Pilates as a complement to other sports, be that dancing, running, sight, whatever it may be. What kind of benefits do we see here?
Usually we see an improvements in performance. So at the minute I'm working with a guy, he's a runner, so he's got improved his sort of run time. He's now running further, he's running quicker, and he's running with less pain. So, biomechanically we can improve the movement. He came in with an injury, so we've
Hmm.
obviously helped settle that injury down, which has helped. And then just his efficiency of movement as well, with being able to switch on different muscles and looking at the way he runs, has changed as well. So, that's a great example with like the dancers that I work with. It depends on the dancer, but one of them, we're working on her turnout at the minute, and then just her core because she can do a triple turn, but she wants to be able to do a quadruple turn. So we're working on just finding that center and obviously working with more balance exercises and turnout exercises with her. So again, depends on the person, but you usually find that your performance improves, which is why, nowadays, all the famous tennis players are doing Pilates. The
Hmm.
football teams here in Australia are doing Pilates. Lots of those sort of
Yeah.
teams are doing Pilates to see the benefits.
Wow.
What about just how much of your client base is just people also that just do Pilates? That is their activity. A lot of people like, my wife's a yoga instructor and that is her activity. So I'm sure that Pilates is similar in that sense, right?
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's where you've got the place of kind of the reformer studios. Most people that are going to the reformer studios are really going because they want a good workout. You feel a really good burn, you build some strength, yet
Yeah.
flexibility through that class. So I think those general classes are where you get a lot more of the enjoyment. I mean, obviously, I have clients that come because they just, like doing it.
Hmm.
But because I specialize in, injury prevention and biomechanics, majority of my clients start with me because, there's pain
They've
or an
got
injury,
something.
and then they continue on because they see the benefits and they enjoy it.
How does your nutrition coaching plug in to the to your broader practice?
Well, that's where I sort of started off in nutrition first and worked for other people. And then when I kind of got into the Pilates space, I wanted to connect everything together because when it comes to health, it's great to work on one area. But as you guys know, your sleep, your nutrition, your exercise, it's all
All
interconnected.
together.
So yeah, it all has a flow on effect. So I often do sort of, one-on-one, nutrition consults with clients, but then I developed an online platform specifically sort of around women's health where we focus on nutrition, good movement. So there's Pilates and strength workouts in there. We have women's health masterclasses where we might talk about, I might have a hormone expert come in, or, we talk about gut health and those types of things.
Mm.
So I've kind of drawn it together more online now for my nutrition, just because so much of my sort of day-to-day hours I'm in the studio. But it's really funny because, I'll be working with a client, like my runner, for example, and he will sort of say, oh, I'm not digesting, this very well on my run, blah, blah, blah. So then we talk about optimizing his nutrition for his training. So even though you wouldn't think it would have, such a flow on aspect, when you're teaching somebody physically movement, it really does kind of feed together as well.
Yeah.
Oh, it's all connected, and I can tell you, digesting things well during a run is critical unless you want that run to become very unpleasant very fast. Um,
Yeah.
and anyone who runs distances has been there. I know I don't have to connect the dots on that one. So okay, so it's online nutrition coaching. Do you help prepare meal plans? Do you suggest recipes?
Yep, pretty much all of that. So I do meal plans, I do recipes. Again, we obviously do a really thorough history. So we may look at any
Hmm.
intolerance that people have or autoimmune conditions. That's quite a big
Sure.
thing now as well. So again, individualized depending on the person. Within our kind of sort of membership portal, I think we've got like 150 plus kind of recipes in there, but they're all ones
Cool.
that I've worked on and developed. And then we often sort of run challenges. So at the start of the year, we kind of, explored having a no sugar challenge, or we cut out processed foods. And we kind of look at those types of things just to encourage people to experiment with their nutrition, but also, trying to find healthier ways to support their bodies.
Hmm. Very good.
Processed foods are so they're ubiquitous, they're inexpensive, they're satiating, and they're terrible for you. And it's it's
Exactly.
uh, it's such a trap to fall into. Um, Tell me about some recipes. What are you really liking right now?
Well, at the minute, like my family, we kind of, it's we're moving into autumn here and then into winter. So we're doing a lot more sort of roasted vegetables, stews, soups, chicken cacciatore, sort of more of those warming foods. I'm somebody that obviously works. I've got kids, so I don't have hours to spend in the kitchen. So I like things that are going to be sort of quick and easy. So,
Yeah.
like last night we had tacos, you just using herbs and spices and things, and then lots of veggies as well. So kind of sort of sticking to sort of, that protein, some type of really good carb, whether or not it's, rice or sweet potato or that type of thing, and then really honing in on the veggies as well.
That sounds excellent. Yeah, I had tacos last night as well. You lead Pilates retreats, don't you?
Yes, so we've got one coming up in July, which is in Koh Samui, Thailand. So that's
Oh, wow.
exciting.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So in tropical paradise in sunshine. And generally the retreats are really, it's a time to focus in on yourself. Obviously, we do
Hmm.
Pilates. We try to include some other movement modalities, whether or not that's some, yoga or breath work sessions or meditation and that type of thing as well. And then obviously people get some free time to explore the destination and stuff. So in Thailand, we're going to go off to an elephant sanctuary. We're
Oh,
doing a
cool.
Thai cook, yeah, a Thai cooking class. We've got activities that are planned as part of the group, and then people get free time to, wherever we usually stay on our retreats, there's usually some type of pool or sauna or, things that are sort of complementary to wellness and sort of rehab too. So, they're just a great way, I think, to immerse yourself, give yourself some time out, sort of slow down, focus on your body, and really connect to some really great people who generally have very similar interests. So a lot of
Hmm.
my clients that kind of go to away together on retreat, they stay in touch and they create friendships. So I think having that community aspect is important as well.
So yeah, I'm curious with the retreat format because that's actually something we haven't really had a guest on that does, and I think
No,
it's
we
kind of
haven't.
an interesting thing to talk about because especially the theme of this is fit after 40, obviously, and that's probably it seems like that would probably be like the kind of age demographic you're starting to look at for these types of things. But what kind of reactions and responses and results do people come away telling you they have from going on one of your retreats?
Most people sort of come away with that, it's like anything, you have a weekend away and you come away with that enthusiasm, like, yes, I'm going to start, putting this into my everyday life. But I think too, sometimes we need to step away from sort of your regular environment and your regular routine to hit some realizations, to really, go, all right, I need to make a change, in this area of my life. So sometimes it's not always, related around doing more Pilates. People come away and go, you know what? I have just realized I've lost, three loved ones in the last
Hmm.
year, and life is
Mhm.
really short. And I've been putting work first and I've been putting my family first and not prioritizing things. So this retreat has kind of showed me that, I've really got to start looking after myself. So even things like that. And then sometimes it's just that sort of community and connection aspect that comes out. So, I've had
Yeah.
clients come along by themselves and they're very happy, they're single, and then they get together with other people for a week and they're like, "Oh, I feel more confident now to actually go out and put myself out there to create friends because they've been scared up until that point to do it." So I think it can be life transforming, but just kind of enjoying the experiences and then sort of reflecting on your life is a big part of it too.
And I guess kind of going a little kind of rewinding a little bit back just to Pilates in general, like because we didn't really get into this too much. Like, say me, I'm not very familiar with practice Pilates, but like a lot of what you talked about is pretty interesting to me, honestly. Like, actually, I'm a runner nursing an injury right now, so a lot of things you're talking about are are quite appealing to me.
You got any
Um,
Pilates for busted ankles?
yeah, I got a busted ankle right now, so working with one of our other guests on that one, he's a PT, but and so what are your recommendations for people that want to like, I mean, what is the best approach to kind of get into Pilates? I go
Yeah.
to yoga classes every week, but I don't go to Pilates. Like, what's the best way to approach this activity? And like for somebody like me that doesn't know much about it, like if I'm interested, I want to get involved in this activity for, rehab purposes or maybe just to get in better shape?
Yeah, that's a great question because, as we're sort of saying before, there's lots of different types of Pilates out there. I think if you already see, a massage therapist, a chiro, an osteo, or somebody, start with them first, have a conversation and say, look, I really want to do some rehab or some strengthening work. Do you know a great Pilates instructor that really focuses in on this? So I think
Yeah.
that's a recommendation first and foremost. Speak to your friends and stuff too. Then after that, if you're in the States, there's the PMA, so the Pilates Method Alliance. They have a
Mhm.
website. You can jump on there and you can check out, the studios that are in your area and give them a call. And, you can just do a Google search for the studios in your area, look up what qualifications they have. If they've done a comprehensive course, it'll usually be a diploma or an advanced diploma in Pilates, or rehabilitation Pilates. There will be a proper qualification. And then give them a call and have a chat to them and say, when people call me up, they'll say, "Hi, my chiro's referred me to you because I've got really bad lower back pain. I've had it on and off for a couple of years. I've worked with a PT. It's not disappearing. Is this something that you can help me with?" So I think, Google search it, have a phone call, speak to friends and family, and then speak to the practitioners that you know. And generally within that network, you should be able to find, a good instructor. And sometimes the first one you go to might not be the right
The
one,
best
might not
one,
be the
sure.
right fit. So yeah, just be willing like everything else. It might just be a little bit of exploration. I think if you are fit, generally active fit, nothing's wrong, and you go to a general reformer class, you are just going to be thrown into it. You are going to rock up, they're going to tell you to hop on the reformer, and they're just going to give you instructions, and you're going to have to try to keep up. If you want to be guided, you want to learn the connection to your core, you want to connect to your breath, you want to get the most out of your movement, then look for one of those smaller studios that really does have that
Mhm.
individualization.
Yeah, because I think that, it's interesting because the reformer, it's kind of an intimidating piece of equipment if you just look at one to begin with. And I can only imagine if you went into a class and like just if I went into one and they're like, all right, just hop in and follow along, I would probably walk out of the class pretty quickly, honestly, So
Yeah, and it happens. Like I'll often get people call me up and just say, all right, so I'm just going to be straight up with you. I have tried 5 lessons at the local reformer studio and I really didn't know what I was doing. And I actually felt pain after a class. And now, I'm now calling you. So, you will have experience. Some people will have experiences like
yeah.
that. Other people will kind of do it and just be like, walk out and be like, that was the most amazing thing that I've ever done. So I think if you are going in to do a reformer class, obviously pick a beginner one to start. Don't go straight into an intermediate because they will get you to change the springs. They will get you to change the settings on the reformer. In my studio, I do all that for my clients. One,
Mhm.
from a liability perspective, because
Yeah.
I want my clients to be safe. And there are lawsuits out there going on at the minute with around this area, as there always is. But two, I'm the expert in the field of
Yeah.
Pilates. Like I know what my clients, what spring settings they should be working on.
Sure.
And I also progress those spring settings as they get stronger too. So, each to their own, but I work with doing all of that myself. And plus with the individualization, they're coming to me because I'm designing their program. And
Yeah.
part of that is me looking after them and setting up my equipment. Then I know also that my equipment's being looked after because I'm the one that's doing it all too.
It's the same thing. It happens with yoga and it happens with Pilates, and they kind of like go in these waves. And right now, these this is like a major fitness trend in the United States. I don't know if
It's
it's the same in
huge.
Australia.
Yeah,
There's got to be there's a lot of commercialization of these, and like larger companies where they're like setting up studios like all over the place, and they're all corporate studios and stuff like that. And same thing happens with yoga and a lot of these things. So it just seems like it might. I wasn't aware that there were people like you that were working with people individually, like or in more small classes and so on to like kind of help people through individual problems. And I think that's like an interesting and beneficial thing that you're offering. And I just wonder how prevalent that is even here. I don't know.
I think look, that used to be, there's also two forms of Pilates in the sense that there's classical Pilates and then there's contemporary Pilates. So classical Pilates is the original method that Joseph taught, his original set of exercises, and they do it in a certain sequence, and they use
Uh-huh.
his original equipment and original spring strength. So you've got classical and then you've got contemporary, which is essentially what I teach, where we use those classical exercises, but we break them down or we, modify them and expand them depending on what we need to work with. So I think that's really important to point out too when people are kind of looking for Pilates. And back when I did my sort of Pilates degree in the early 2000s, not many people knew about Pilates. Like everyone would be like, sorry, what do you teach? 20
Yeah.
years later, Pilates is having this huge moment,
Mm.
and the discussion within the industry amongst instructors is we used to be like, oh, nobody knew about Pilates, and now we're like, oh, everybody knows about Pilates, but do they really know about Pilates? Because there's all these different forms of Pilates
Sure.
that
Yeah.
have changed the method essentially. So I think as a whole, we kind of have to look at it as like, yay, Pilates is getting known, which is great. But sort of this smaller studio with the individualization instruction is getting smaller and smaller because the courses where you can become a reformer instructor are cheaper than, say, my in-depth course, which takes a couple of years. You can now become
Mm.
a reformer instructor off a couple of weeks. So
That
you're
Oh.
seems
not
too
getting
fast.
people. It does seem too fast, and this is the debate within the industry right now. But they're offering a very different product. If you pay $20 to go to a reformer class where you've got 15 people and everyone's doing the same thing, it's a very different offering to someone like me that has 20 years of experience and has done umpteen courses in all the different parts of the body and rehabilitation and then teaches you individually with a maximum of 4 people. Unfortunately, at the minute, it looks like us smaller studios are kind of on the dying end
Mm.
because we can't compete cost wise, price
Yeah.
wise with these bigger studios because we don't have the level of people coming in. And so it is a very different offering. I think it's, again, great for Pilates in general that people know about it. But as a customer, it's just evaluating what you want. And what you want out of your workouts. It's great that there's lots of offerings for the customer, but that's where they're trying to tighten the regulations with our industry to, try to almost have different classifications for instructors that have done comprehensive courses and then instructors that have just done a reformer course. But at the
Yeah.
minute, it's kind of a free for all. So you've just got to do your research yourself, unfortunately, which,
So is there a major governing, like, I mean, like in yoga, I think of Yoga Alliance, and you mentioned, I think, the Pilates Movement
Method
Association,
Alliance. Yeah.
Method
Hmm.
Alliance. Is that who does certifications in, say, the US, or
Yeah. So
what
there's
does certifications
different.
look like?
The certifications, again, they can be done, they're usually done through different studios across, the world. And we've got different, types. So we've got different companies that offer. They usually, to meet sort of a Cert 4 or a diploma, they have to include certain things. So again,
Hmm.
if you're someone that's interested in doing training, definitely look at what they're offering and making sure it is a full qualified diploma or whatever. But they also break it down. You can just become a mat instructor. You can become a equipment instructor, just a reformer instructor, or you can do a comprehensive course that includes it all. So,
Is it
um,
all? Okay.
yeah, lots of different offerings. But
Wow.
again, your best place is to check out the PMA, which you just Google PMA Pilates. It'll pop up online for the States.
We've talked about the reformer quite a bit. A lot of people may not know what that is. So can you describe that piece of equipment just so people have a better understanding of what we've been discussing?
Sure. So the reformer, it kind of, my clients always refer to it as the bed because they get to lie down on it to do things like footwork and that. And it has a set of spring systems. So it usually has 4 or 5 springs and the springs are different loads. And if you're, say, lying on your back and you're pushing out and in, you're going to be pushing against that spring resistance. But then, we'll be doing work where we sit up and we can, work through the arms, or we can do, rolling back through the spine. So, depending on what you're working on, we will either increase the load or we will decrease the load to make it harder or easier, depending on the exercise and what area of the body we're focusing on. So, you can do, push-ups to planks to balance work to footwork, a whole range. You can work the whole body on the reformer. And the great thing is you can change it up. So I can have my 82-year-old clients work on the reformer, and I can have my 14-year-old dancer on the reformer. So it's high enough that even if you have mobility issues, you can still get on it and then do your strength work.
That's really
Great.
cool. I want to go back to the retreats just for a moment. That just sounds like such a great experience to me. And I want to focus in. You mentioned the mental health aspect of it, and I think a lot of people know that Western society has not been spectacular at maintaining community. Um, and so could you speak to that aspect of these retreats a little bit? How many people do you take on these trips, and how do you find they connect on these trips?
Generally, we have about 5 to 12 people, so they're kind of
Okay.
small groups. Usually depends on where we're going, and sort of like the ones that I do kind of closer to my area. We hire a house. It's kind of twin share rooms, and so we have like 8 to 10 that can fit in that house. So generally, yeah, anywhere between sort of 5 and 12 people, and we kind of do some ice breaking activities and things at the start so that people can kind of get to know each other. So that I think that's a big part of it. And then having a host that, as a host, you need to be aware of how people are, interacting. You can tell from their body language whether or not someone is feeling comfortable or not feeling comfortable. And sometimes as the host, you've got to take people a little bit, under your wing and, encourage them,
Sure.
ask them questions and include them. So I think part of it is the connecting to the other people, and then part of it is having that host that can kind of read the room as well. I like to do some games with my clients. So before they come on the retreat, I will send them like a little questionnaire, and I'll ask them to share with me like one of their favorite songs or a song that has a meaning to them. And so then at night when we're like having dinner together, I will put the playlist together, and it'll pop up with, all these songs, and I'll be like, okay, whose is this favorite song? And they'll go, oh, this is my favorite song, and I love this song because of this. And so then everybody kind of speaks to each other and has that connection and goes, oh, I love this song too, and stuff like that. So I think if you can kind of create some of those sort of experiences together just by doing those small things, that makes a difference as well.
That sounds great. That sounds it sounds like a great strategy for really bringing people together. I love that. I would love to join on one of these actually. Um, so why do you think this makes such a powerful reset for people? I mean, getting away, shutting out externalities. What makes this so powerful?
I think it's that in-person connection. As we kind of know, if we want to have sort of longevity and we want to, live longer and have happier lives, they even say as we start to get older, that connection with other people, that sense of community ranks above how much exercise that you're doing in that. Because if we start to feel lonely, then that can have a massive flow-on effect to our mental health and then our physical health and so on. So I think there's partly that. I also think, post pandemic, we had so much time online being disconnected to people.
Yeah.
I'm definitely finding in the studio that people, they want to come in, they want to see the other 3 people in their class and have a chat. And what did you do this week? And how's your daughter going? And I think the retreat is like the next level onto that. They can have that, real intimate experience with a small group of people that get them, that understand them, because they're all there doing the same thing together. So it's taking that sort of level of connection with your sort of fellow people to that next level. And I think post pandemic, people are craving that more and more because so much is online and so
Hmm.
much now is becoming automated with AI that,
Yep.
Hmm.
making that time too. If you meet someone up in person, it's almost special now because it's like, oh, you've actually made time rather than, just sending me a quick text or scheduling, an online sort of thing, where it's possible. So I think just that precious sort of time aspect as well. So kind of all of the things together. But yeah, and then moving away from your environment. I was listening to a neuroscientist the other day was talking about, how we sort of say, oh, another week flew by and time goes by
Yeah.
really quickly.
Mm,
Part of that is because our brain, when it's doing habitual things, it almost switches off. It just gets used to
right.
it. It doesn't have to function. When we move out of our environment and we go to a new environment and we have to, think about what are we going to, there's different food to eat. We have to explore different areas. We can't take the same route. Our brain has to work harder. It creates more neural connections. And I don't know about you, but whenever I go on holidays, I'm like, oh, the day is going so long. Why is the day going so long? And that's because our brain is having to make those new neural connections. So again, a big part of the retreat, stepping out to a different environment, you're making those new neural connections, which is going to give you deeper connections to people as well.
And it sounds like you've planned a lot of fun activities. I want to take that cooking class myself, actually. I think that would be a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's amazing, and especially when you get to go to these fun places like, with the elephants, you get to like walk with the elephants and feed the
Mm.
elephants and where else do you get to do that? Like, and then you're doing that with this group of people. So that is going to be an experience you're going to remember forever.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Like, you have these very small classes, but are you able to form kind of fitness communities with your studio as well? Or
Yeah, definitely. So when it comes to like, I've got a few classes. My Friday morning 10 a.m. class, they're a group of ladies that the four of them have been in that class for 13 years together.
Wow.
Yeah, 13 years with the same four ladies. And they catch up. Every sort of 3 to 4 months, they go out for lunch. They often invite me to go along with them if I can make it and stuff too. Then there's been, other people, they'll come in and they'll be like, oh, I've got this great handyman working at my place. Oh, is he really good? I need that. Can I get his number? What TV program are you watching at the minute? Because I need a new one. So there's a lot of connection, and there's kind of lifelong friendships that have developed too. So I'm really proud of creating that community. And people will come in and they will share their wins and they will share their losses and they will share when a client came in yesterday and just said that her daughter is pregnant. So it's lovely to get this connection. And again, if you're getting that connection with other people, you get so much more out of your movement because, those endorphins are flowing. And sometimes, if people come in feeling really not so great and they're in pain, they still walk out feeling so much better. And
Mm.
sometimes maybe that's not necessarily the exercises that they're doing, it's the connection they're having
just
with
a
the other
connection.
people.
It's all
I
Yeah.
think
connected, yeah.
that's like such a great thing about like fitness communities. Like right now, I've got this ankle injury and I'm not running very much, but I still text with all the guys in my running group like constantly through the day, or they call me because they're like, and we're not even talking about running, we're just talking about all the other stuff. But those connections form because of running, or in your case, those connections form because of Pilates. And that's really, I just, it's important to just kind of the whole life experience, to bringing those communities back together. And I think that's excellent whenever you can do something like that and create that kind of fitness community.
They're so important.
A general question for you is uh, what do you feel like you get out of being a Pilates instructor? Like what is, I mean, because obviously you do this because obviously it's your job, but it's also something you love. I can tell by the way you talk about it and the way you talk about the excitement you have from your classes and the relationships that people form in your retreats and classes that you must have a strong love for. So what do you feel like you get from being a fitness instructor, a fitness expert, and Pilates in general?
I guess it's just a joy of seeing somebody, have, improvement or a breakthrough. Like when someone, comes back to class and they're like, oh, I was able to pick up my grandchild and, I had a whole day playing with them and my
Mm.
back pain wasn't killing me afterwards. That's so rewarding to hear. So, from a selfish point of view, getting that
Yeah.
sort of feedback is amazing that you can make changes. What it feels like, when I'm working with a client, if we just tweak this and this and this, and then it has a massive flow and effect and change, that's massive. So I guess, I love getting that feedback from people. I love being able to help people and see that. And then also, I'm a lifelong learner. So, I really enjoy, like we're talking about the foot before, learning about the foot, learning about the biomechanics of the
Hmm.
foot. So then when people come in, it's almost like a bit of a puzzle. Oh, you've got, plantar fasciitis, so you've got tendonitis. You know what? I'm going to be able to apply all the things that I've learned and help you. So it's a combination, I think, of that constant learning and then just really seeing how you can help people, and having that connection with people too. Even myself, if I was sitting at a desk, I mean, part of the reason why I didn't end up becoming a nutritionist full time is because I
Hmm.
worked as a nutritionist full time for a period of time, and sitting at a desk all day nearly killed me. So the
Yeah.
movement aspect of my job, being able to move constantly, and I'm demonstrating different exercises and all the rest of it, means that my body is getting all the lubrication for its joints and that it needs as well. So that physical aspect of it for me is a big part of it too.
Do you have a routine or a set of movements that you're particularly partial to? What are your favorite Pilates exercises?
Well, I like the teaser, which is kind of hard to explain, but you start lying down on your back and then you end up rolling up so that you lift your upper body into the air and your feet into the air. So you make your sort of V-sit position.
Okay.
So that's a favorite one of mine just for sort of full body work. And then spinal mobility is another area I like to focus on, and glutes. My clients are always like, "Oh, Kate's super happy if my glutes are sore." And I'm like, yes, I am, because when your glutes are sore, I know functionally that your lower back and that is going to be much better and your hips are going to be much better. So I guess within my sort of teaching sense, I do focus a lot on switching on the glutes. Foot alignment is another big one, because if your feet are even just aligned, that makes, you're standing and sitting how many hours of the day. So again, those small little movements add up. And then spinal mobility, because we get quite stiff. So I do
Hmm.
like a lot of the exercises where we're mobilizing the spine, but maybe we're incorporating balance or, abdominals
Hmm.
as well. So you're kind of getting that combination of the strength and the mobility at the same time.
And that's something that a lot of people just you don't address a lot, I think, in a lot of activities is the fact that like people think about your core being the front, but they don't think about your spine and your back and like
Right.
doing things to strengthen your spine and back and how important that actually is for function. And yet so many exercises we do don't incorporate any of that.
No, they don't.
Exactly. And also, I have to point out when it comes to the core, your core is not just your abdominals. Okay.
Right.
Everybody thinks your core is just your abs. It's
Yeah.
not. It's your hip flexors as well. It's your multifidus, which is muscles, your postural muscles in your back. It's your diaphragm, so your breathing muscles. Like all of this is part of the core. It's not just focusing on your abdominals. So a lot of people think, oh, if I'm going to strengthen my core, I've got to do ab crunches. No, you don't. Like, we need to work on balance. We need to work on coordination. Like, there are so many exercises that you will be doing that's working on your core that does not involve any type of ab crunches at all.
And I had a physical therapist tell me that there is no peer for Pilates when it comes to strengthening the core. That is hands down the best workouts for strengthening the core, Pilates.
Yeah, and I think also, part of the core too is your pelvic floor. A lot of people
Hmm.
don't think about their pelvic floor, they don't think about how strong or how weak it is, is it functioning well? A lot of people, as they age, they may start to get some, leakage or some stress
Hmm.
incontinence happening, especially for women if they've had kids or they're going through perimenopause and then menopause. So just being aware of your pelvic floor, can you connect to those muscles? Bringing that into play can make a huge difference as well. And again, if you're not thinking about pelvic floor and maybe you're overworking, your rectus abdominis and doing all these crunches and doming that rectus, you're actually going to be stressing the pelvic floor. So,
Mm.
get your pelvic floor checked out if you need, but, if you're working with a trainer, talk about your pelvic floor because it really makes a difference.
Hmm.
That's great advice. Well, Kate, I really appreciate you taking the time to speak with us. If our listeners want to connect with you, where can they find you? Website, social media, etc.
Yeah, sure. So I've got a website that's mindmovementhealth.com.au because I'm in Australia.
Right.
And then you can find me on all the social places at Mind Movement Health as well. So I'm on, Instagram and Facebook mainly, and then YouTube as well. And I also have a podcast as well called Mind Movement Health. So we kind of chat all things as it suggests, mind movement and health. So people can check that out too.
Well, very
Sounds
cool.
great.
Well, I'll look forward to listening to that myself.
Yeah, me too.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us.
Yeah,
No
thank you.
worries.
This was
Thanks so much for
actually
having me
great.
on.
Thank you for listening. Please make sure to like or subscribe on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. We also list the show notes and have lots of bonus content available on Substack or Instagram.